Hey everyone, today I'm looking at how to fly a missed approach for an instrument landing in Microsoft Flight Simulator. I've covered go-arounds for VFR flights in a previous video, but a missed approach on instruments is slightly different since you need to follow the defined procedure a lot more closely. This video is also somewhat of an extension of the previous video that I made on VOR approaches, so if you haven't seen that one yet, you might want to check it out first because I'm not going to re-explain all of the concepts I explained in that one in this video. In this video, I'm going to explain how to read the missed approach procedure on the chart, as well as how to enter and fly the holding pattern that's indicated on it. You'd have to fly a missed approach in a few different circumstances. The first one is if you've descended to the minimum descent altitude for your approach and you can't see the runway, you won't have much of a choice but to go around. The other possibility is that you've got an unstable approach. Either you're coming in too fast or you're coming in a little bit too high and you can't get down to the runway safely. You'd also have to execute the missed approach procedure. The procedure is going to tell you how and where to fly so that you can have another go at the landing or go to another airfield where there might be better weather conditions. Some of the skills you're going to want to be familiar with to successfully fly a missed approach is how to tune and intercept a VOR radial, as well as being comfortable with the airplane that you're flying. Let's start by looking at what we can see in the flight planning screen, and then we're going to fly the missed approach procedure, and I'll show you how I handle some of the more challenging aspects of it. I've already got my flight all set up and it's the exact same as I used for the VOR approach video. I'm going to be taking off from Portland Hillsboro and landing at Astoria Regional on runway 08 using the VOR approach. You can see the approach pretty well in the flight planner, but unfortunately there's no way to see the missed approach procedure from here. Hopefully they'll add this feature in the future, but for now we're going to have to revert back to using the actual physical chart. Just like last time, you can find the chart on airnav.com by just looking for the airport and finding the runway 08 VOR approach. I'm going to brief you on all the details of how to fly the missed approach while I'm flying towards the airport on final, so let's jump right into the flight. And while I've got a few seconds here, I just want to remind you, if you do get some value out of this video, please make sure to hit like and subscribe. And if you have any comments or you want to critique my technique or I did something wrong, feel free to pop it in the comments below. Alright, so like I said, I am on final approach to intercept the runway. I'm flying on radial 070 as closely as possible, and I'm descending down to my minimum descent altitude, which is around 660 feet, but I'm going to settle for around 700 since that's close enough. I've dropped the weather as low as it'll go, and I've added some precipitation to make it as difficult as possible to spot the runway so we can simulate a real go-around due to low visibility. The missed approach procedure is spelled out in the box at the top right, but when you're flying the plane, reading text is a little bit inconvenient, especially when it's in a tiny font like that. For that reason, there's also a visual description of the procedure in the profile view. Each box represents a different part of the procedure. The first box says that you need to continue flying straight ahead until you've gone past 1,000 feet. You have to get to 1,000 feet as quickly as possible, so you'll want to clean up the airplane as well as use takeoff power. Once you've reached 1,000 feet, you can do what's indicated in the next box, which is start a climbing left turn to 3,000 feet. That's going to take you back towards the hold fix, which in this case is the Astoria VOR. A missed approach pretty much always has a hole that you can fly to so that you can decide on your next move. Either you're going to try and fly the approach again, or you're going to fly to some other airport. The hold will usually be in a direction that makes it easy to try and fly the approach again. You can see in this case we've got left-hand turns, which lines up perfectly with taking us out on radial 250 again for a second try at the landing. The tricky part of this missed approach procedure is that you're inevitably not very far from the VOR, so it's hard to get on the right radial you need to fly to enter the hold. I'll show you how I handle that in just a second. We're going to have to do a parallel entry because we're going to be coming at the VOR from the opposite direction of the hold. That means I'm going to fly to the VOR and then fly outbound on the 119 radial that's shown on the chart. Once I've flown outbound for about a minute, I'm going to do a teardrop turn to come back and intercept the 299 radial back to the station so that I can start the hold. At that point, if I wasn't sure what I was going to do or if there was other traffic trying to land as well, I would stay in the holding pattern until I can either fly the approach again, or if I decide to go to some other airport, I might change course entirely to go wherever I'm going. In my case, since I'm going to be taking another stab at the landing, all I'm going to do is enter the hold, and normally I should probably do one loop of the hold, but I'm actually going to go straight out and join radial 250 to do the approach again. Alright, I'm about 1 nautical mile from the station and the VOR now, and I could sort of make out the runway at one point as I was approaching, but it was nowhere near safe enough to land. I can start the missed approach procedure the moment that I realize I'm not going to make the runway, so I'm going to do that right now. I never came off the autopilot since I only disable it once I've got a visual on the runway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my altitude, which is going to be 3,000 feet as my destination, and I'm going to use vertical speed mode to get into a climb as quickly as possible. I'll also apply full power as if I was doing a regular takeoff, and I'm going to clean up the airplane by pulling up the flaps, and if there was anything else I needed to do to prepare for a climb, I would do that as well. Once I go through 1,000 feet, that's where I can start my turn back towards the VOR while continuing my climb up to 3,000. Since I set my target altitude right from the start, I don't need to adjust it again. The airplane's just going to continue in the climb that I've got it in until it gets to 3,000 feet. I do obviously still need to keep an eye on the altimeter, the airspeed, and as well as my heading to make sure that I'm heading back towards the station. Now to get back to the VOR, what I do is I turn 180 degrees to start, and if I'm flying with an airplane with a glass cockpit, I'm going to cheat a bit and keep an eye on my location over the ground on the multifunction display and align myself to fly over the station. It's approximate, but it's going to be good enough because I'm so close to the station that it's practically impossible to intercept the specific course at this point. The other way you could do it if you don't have a GPS showing your position is you could turn the course knob to see what radial you're currently on. The needle's going to move very quickly off center if you're trying to do that though, because you're in the middle of a turn and you're really close to the station to start with. So don't try and get on a very specific radial, just try and get in the general direction of the VOR so that the needle's not fully deflected. You might need to do a few heading corrections based on how quickly the radial is running away from you. Doing this is definitely a lot more difficult than having the GPS map showing on the multifunction display. And don't forget, again, you won't be able to get it perfect because the needle is just way too sensitive this close to the station. Once I've gone past the station, it becomes a lot easier to intercept a radial since I'm going to be flying away from the station and the needle will start to be a little less sensitive. I don't need to get it perfect, but the closer I am to the radial that I want to fly, which is in this case radial 119 away from the station, the easier it's going to be to do the entry into the hold. Radial 119 is what we saw in the briefing section, which is what's indicated on the chart as your first course away from the VOR. I also took a note of the time as I went by the station so that I can start counting 1 minute from once I flew by it so that I know when I can start my turn inbound to join the hold. Doing this with the autopilot makes it a whole lot easier to do everything all at once, and I really recommend you do the same. Trying to fly the airplane while trying to do all these extra tasks at the same time when you're just getting started is really difficult to do, and even I still struggle with it sometimes. That said, even though I am using the autopilot, I'm still keeping an eye on the most important instruments when I'm flying under IFR, so I'm constantly checking the airspeed, the altitude, the heading, and the attitude that I'm flying. I can start the teardrop turn to the right now that it's been a minute. I'm going to set my heading to be about 340 so that I can intercept the inbound course, which is going to be 299, which is the opposite of the course we flew outbound from the VOR. Because I want to get on it as quickly as possible, and by using a larger difference between the actual radial I want to fly and my heading, I'll get there a little bit faster. As usual, I need to turn the course knob to the right course, and then I need to keep an eye on the needle as it moves in the compass. When the needle starts moving, I'm going to start shallowing up my heading to be a little bit closer to what I actually need to fly, which in this case is 299. Again, I keep monitoring all my instruments while I'm doing that as well. I'm checking the airspeed, the altitude, the heading, and the attitude. In the end, I think I'm actually going to end up flying one loop of the hole after all because I want some time to prepare the airplane for the approach. I'm a little bit high and I'm a little bit faster than I'd like to be to fly the approach again. So I'm going to go ahead and start a 180 degree left turn once I get to the VOR. Once I completed my 180-degree turn, I'm then going to check the time again, and I'm going to count 1 minute, which is when I'll be able to turn back inbounds toward the VOR. I'll skip forward a few seconds here since there's not much to see while I'm on the outbound leg of the hold. I am really just setting my power so that I get closer to my approach airspeed, and I'm going to start my descent down to around 2,000 feet, which is going to be a little bit closer to what we want to be to start flying the approach. In reality, I would need permission to be able to start my descent like this, but I'm assuming that ATC was having a good day and told me that I can just descend down to my target altitude. Once it's been 1 minute that I've been flying outbound, I'm going to start another left turn to intercept the 299 radial again. That's going to be my course inbound towards the VOR, and it's going to set me up really nicely to fly the approach again, since the first heading that I need to fly on that is going to be heading 250. The neat thing about the inbound turn to the VOR is if you use the autopilot to do it, you're going to probably end up rolling out just about on radial 299 because it's going to have done the turns at a standard rate, which means you should pretty much be on the right course. You may be a few degrees to the left or right, but you really shouldn't need to adjust too much. Once I'm flying back in on radial 299, that's when I really need to get ready for flying my approach again. I'm going to double check that my airspeed is good, that my altitude is where I want it to be, and I'll probably take a few seconds just to recheck the approach procedure so that I have it fresh in my mind. Once I do get to the VOR, the first thing I'm going to do is turn to radial 250 for the outbound leg of the procedure turn, and then I'll do my procedure turn and head back towards the airport, and hopefully I'll be able to land if the conditions are a little bit better than they were a few seconds ago. And that's pretty much all there is to a missed approach. If you can't see the runway, you just follow whatever procedure is defined on the chart to your holding point. You hold there for as long as you need to, and then you either fly the approach again or you go somewhere else to try to land. I hope this video taught you a thing or two about missed approaches. As usual, if you have any comments, put them below, and if you got some value out of this video, please make sure to hit like and subscribe.